Hey listeners, last year was our 15th year of the best in food storytelling. As we head into 2025, we're kicking off a contest in collaboration with the podcast series Feast and Harmony and Sixth Man, where you have the opportunity to win a 4-night cruise for 2 on Chefs Making Waves, a food, wine, and spirits festival at sea. When you donate to HRN, you'll be entered for the chance to win a porthole cabin for 2 on Chefs Making Waves, sailing May 5th through 9th, 2025, from Miami to Cozumel, Mexico on Norwegian Gem. You'll also support another year of great food storytelling with a portion of your donation going toward disaster relief for the food and beverage communities within Western North Carolina and Southern California. This cruise is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for culinary adventurers, featuring top celebrity chefs including Jonathan Waxman, Antonio Lafaso, Robert Irvine, and many, many more. There's a myriad of experiences such as restaurant takeovers, live food and mixology demos, themed parties, and more. To enter your chance to win, please visit heritageradionetwork.org/cruise. Terms and conditions apply. You must be 21 or over to enter. That's heritageradionetwork.org/cruise.
You're listening to Heritage Radio Network.
I didn't necessarily have the same awareness that I do now about how much abundance exists around us and the relationship that specifically Indigenous peoples have cultivated with the land for thousands of years. After immersing myself, I just have a more profound and deeper appreciation for the land that I live on.
Every day, in one way or another, we interact with the land around us. But it takes real effort to truly tune in, to listen, to learn, and to honor the lessons that the earth offers. For Jaskrit Bala, who you just heard from, this means embracing the wisdom passed down through Indigenous practices and recognizing our deep connection to the plants we live alongside. Although we might not always be aware, many everyday fruits and vegetables have rich Indigenous roots. Some, like blueberries, pumpkins, and pecans, have been a part of the American culinary landscape for centuries. Others, like palo verde, pawpaw, and datil peppers, carry deep cultural significance for those who call their specific regions of the United States home. In today's episode, we'll explore how these plants, both wild and cultivated, have shaped our connection to the land and the people closest to us, offering us lessons in abundance, sustainability, and the lasting bond between humans and nature. I'm H. Conley, and this is Meat and 3 on HRN.
Meat and 3.
Meat and 3.
Meat and 3.
1 meat, 3 sides.
Food, news, and storytelling.
A square meal for your ears.
Meat and 3.
For our first story, Maya Okindo speaks with certified herbalist and chef Jaskrit Bala. Raised between New Delhi, India, and Southern California, Jaskrit grew up with an appreciation for cooking and alternative medicine. In deepening her knowledge of these practices, Jaskrit learned that to receive, we must be willing to give.
There is a level of tactfulness and care that you kind of have to have here when you're foraging or making herbal medicines using foraged herbs. In many ways, if you're doing it respectfully and properly, it can be a way of being a steward to that land.
For Jaskrit, being a steward of the land meant more than just living on it. It was about truly connecting with the soil she calls home. This desire led her to volunteer at a regenerative farm, an experience that inspired her to start a 3-year botanical apprenticeship. During this time, Jaskrit immersed herself in all aspects of herbal medicine, botany, and the land that surrounds her.
We would go out to different locations in Southern California every other weekend and immerse ourselves in the local ecology, ethnobotany, and we learned from Indigenous elders about wild, edible, and medicinal, and also toxic plants that grow around us.
Foraging has taught her how much we take for granted what's right in our backyard.
Acorns are like a superfood in the truest sense of the word. They have a complete amino acid profile. They've got protein, healthy fats, and they're so abundantly available all over the country.
Although industrial agriculture has become the norm in the United States, these plants remain essential to Indigenous communities' diets, continuing to nourish and connect generations to the land.
The fact that acorns comprise of such a massive proportion of Southern California Indigenous peoples' diets, it gave me a really deep appreciation for our coast live oak, one of our most widespread native oaks here, and just how generous and giving they are to us and to the animals.
Even the weeds in your garden can become a flavorful part of your meal. Dandelions might come first to mind, but there's also stinging nettle, cleavers, chickweed, and wild mustard, just to name a few.
I love working with edible weeds because there's no harm to the ecosystem by harvesting them, and they're very easy to use and incorporate into your cooking too.
Over the past few years, wild edible plants have gone viral on social media. This content has inspired many to get outside and explore the world around them. While this might seem like a positive trend, it's worth considering. Why are we foraging? Foraging is more than a harvest. It's a reciprocal exchange with the land we occupy. Beyond safety precautions and ethical foraging practices, are we invested in learning from the ancestral stewards of this land?
When you're trying to develop a relationship with the land that you live on, learn from the people that really actually know it. I think it's really easy to just go out and pick things, and then you don't realize that you could be potentially harming that plant stand or ecosystem in some way.
Since the arrival of European settlers in the late 15th century, Indigenous communities have faced ongoing systemic discrimination. Broken treaties with the U.S. government, along with the Indian Removal Act of 1830, led to the forced relocation of thousands of Indigenous people. Spanning 1,000 miles across 9 states, this tragedy became known as the Trail of Tears. Fast forward today, with construction projects like the Dakota Access Pipeline, Indigenous communities are still fighting to protect their land.
It's a travesty that their access has been revoked over and over and over again. That's where seeking out classes, programs, and teachers that highlight and amplify Indigenous voices is really important.
Being deeply connected to nature nurtures both the mind and body. As visitors on this land, we are fortunate to get to experience the wealth it provides. Only after we recognize the privilege we hold can we truly appreciate and enjoy all that the land has to offer.
When you're foraging and keeping yourself safe and the people around you safe, then you can have a lot of fun with it.
Now we're leaving Southern California and making our way to a place where, at first glance, food may seem scarce. Yet, even in the most inhospitable environments, people still find nourishment, as Bean Metcalf will tell you.
When I was a child, growing up in the sun-baked Sonoran Desert, my sister and I used to play with our dolls. Our preferred game was a real-life version of the Oregon Trail computer game. We would put our dolls into makeshift wagons and subject them to terrible calamities. The garden hose would turn into a raging river, while our family dog was transformed into a salivating wild wolf, intent on consuming the children of our innocent doll family. We would steadfastly repair broken axles and set broken arms, doing what must be done to make it to that mythical land of Oregon. But perhaps our favorite task was sourcing food for the intrepid travelers. And I know what you're thinking. Starvation was bound to take those dolls out. Because what could they possibly eat in the middle of the desert? But the truth is that while the desert might seem barren and empty at first glance, it's actually bursting with nutritious edible foods, if you know where to look. The first food you'll meet in the desert is cactus fruits. Once a year, after the rains, the cactus fruits begin to swell and soften. The easiest ones to eat are the prickly pear, growing in sprawling heaps across the dry ground, the fruits a dark, vibrant pink. You have to be careful when you pick them up, because the thin skin is covered in hair-like spines. But on the inside, they are filled with small seeds and sweet, pink flesh. This fruit is typically processed into jams, candy, or my favorite, syrup for margaritas. But the queen of the desert fruits is undoubtedly the saguaro. This cactus can grow up to 60 feet tall, with tufts of fragrant white flowers crowning her many arms. These flowers are primarily pollinated by long-nosed bats, and the flowers soon turn to fruit. To harvest those fruits, native peoples like the Tohono O'odham would use tools made from the dried saguaro ribs, reaching high into the blue desert sky to secure the sweet, sticky treasures. Today, the saguaro fruits are protected. You can only harvest them from public lands if you are a member of one of the Sonoran Desert tribes. However, you can harvest them from your own land, and the best method is still the oldest, using the dried bones of the cactus herself. Once you've tried the sweet fruits of the desert, you can move on to her more savory offerings, starting with mesquite. Mesquite trees are uniquely suited to this dry environment, with deep root systems and tiny leaves that help them survive long periods without rain. They produce seeds that are a rich source of protein, with a sweet and nutty taste. These can be ground into flour or used in soups. You haven't lived if you haven't tasted mesquite pancakes. But more importantly, this scrappy tree, with its incredible tolerance to drought and heat, has long been a source of food for native communities, and could continue to provide nourishment in a changing climate. Another tree that thrives in the Sonoran Desert is the palo verde. This small tree is one of my favorite desert plants. Bright green, smooth stems, and of course, thorny tips. It produces its seeds typically around June, right as the cicadas start droning. The seed pods are bright green and velvety soft, and the beans within are sweet and tender, eaten right off the tree. My sister and I would gorge ourselves in these beautiful beans for as long as we could before they began to dry in the heat, turning a rich, glossy black and hard as rocks. Before we move along, we have to circle back to our friend, the prickly pear. Because fruit is not the only food that comes from the prickly pear. In fact, the round, fleshy pads that make up the whole cactus are edible. Don't let the spines fool you. They're easily burnt or scraped off, and the pads are delicious when cooked. They can be used in tacos, burritos, omelets. You can even buy them conveniently pre-cooked in cans if you don't want to mess around with the spines. Plus, canned foods are easy to check in the back of your covered wagon, right? The bad news is that our dolls usually didn't make it to Oregon. They would inevitably get wiped out by a rogue wave of dysentery or carried off by wild animals. But the good news is that they didn't starve. As we rolled our homemade caravan of wagons around the desert, we found plenty of food to nourish the weary travelers, hidden in plain sight.
Okay, with all that being said, please don't put random stuff you find outside in your mouth without proper research and guidance, okay? Okay. We'll be right back with more Meat and Three after a brief break. Welcome back to Meat and Three. Indigenous plants are often thought of as foraged rather than cultivated. But indigeneity has deeper roots than just the ones found in the forests and across the deserts of the U.S. In a quest for understanding her home state, our very own Florida woman, Kia Dimone, finds herself immersed in the lore of a tiny pepper over 200 years in the making.
There was a time when I thought there was nothing growing under the blazing Florida sun that I ain't know about. Oranges? Check. Yopon? Check. Soursop, goobers, and okra? Check, check, check. That was until one crispy Tallahassee morning when I was unboxing a shipment of locally made hot sauce during my morning shift at the cafe. Stretched across the minimalist label read, Brave Harvest Datil Pepper Hot Sauce. I popped the top and caught a whiff of its sweet, non-assertive fragrance, then thought to myself, what the heck is a datil pepper? Fruity, tangy, and bell pepper-like in nature, datil peppers can best be compared to a habanero. But where a habanero walks in purse first with the heat, the datil pepper has a much more delayed approach. With the power of the internet and a book called The Complete Chili Pepper Book by Dave DeWitt and Paul W. Bolson, I've learned that the datil pepper has, count 'em, 3 possible origin stories. 1. They voyaged across the Mediterranean Sea from the island of Minorca. 2. Ye old African slave trade. 3. A man with a fancy for jelly making named S.B. Vowles utilized this pepper for his recipes. According to Floridian historians, Vowles has the earliest written mention of the pepper, dating back to about 1880. I can't say I'm too surprised, if at all, by this lore. Migration, slave trade, and early recorded recipes are how produce, spices, and the like found shared homes across the globe. This is what stumps me about the datil pepper, however. It's really only in St. Augustine, in a state that shares much of what's produced amongst ourselves in the nation at large. How is the datil pepper exclusive to a city of about 16,000? Short answer. Datil peppers love the humidity and salty winds of St. Johns County. Allegedly, they just grow better there. Long answer. St. Augustine's Menorcan roots deeply influence the cuisine, and as a result, there's an entire food culture built around this pepper. If you were to visit the small coastal historic town, you'd be hard-pressed not to find datil pepper goods all over the place. Jams, candies, spice blends, apparel, and even little datil pepper plants to take home and nurture. And if that wasn't enough, early fall, when the beach winds carry the heat away in exchange for cooler days, the Mayhem Datil Pepper Festival takes over the Palatka Riverfront. It's the largest festival of its kind, and this sort of devotion hasn't yet spread to the rest of the state, and frankly, I'm not sure that it will. I cannot say for certain what the future holds for the delicate datil pepper. The emergence of companies like the Los Angeles-based hot sauce brand Zabs is helping bring the pepper to new audiences. There also appears to be a steady increase of datil pepper products gracing the shelves of grocery stores throughout the South. But what I can say, that even in its modest domain of 12.74 square miles, this little pepper has big staying power.
Now, you truly can't talk about Southern cuisine without pecans. They're the only native tree nut to the U.S., but most Americans are unaware of the work that goes into harvesting them, work that's too often overlooked and thankless. There are faces and stories in those groves that still need to be unearthed. In our final story, we head to Georgia, the leading producer of pecans, where Hugh Huen honors her father's legacy of hard work and perseverance.
I'm standing in the middle of a pecan grove. It's that time of year where winter isn't ready yet for spring to take over. Though the pecan trees are still dormant, it's surrounded by lush green fields. The pecan trees won't show signs of life for a couple more months, and when one wakes up, they'll all wake up. I came to learn from them, more specifically, to learn how to communicate without speaking. The trees talk to one another through the air and underground in ways that modern science hasn't quite figured out yet. While on the surface, these trees may be separate, they are actually connected to one another underground and no doubt hold the most glorious conversations. What we do know is that it involves pheromones above ground and mycorrhiza living below on the tree's roots. The fungi help them absorb nutrients while getting sugars from the trees in return. It is a mutually beneficial or symbiotic relationship. This network allows all of the trees to speak to one another via an underground system of connected roots. If one tree gets sick, the others will direct their nutrients to it and help make it healthy again. I'm sure you're wondering why this wayward, quiet being is trying to eavesdrop on their conversation. To understand that, we have to start at the beginning, with my father's hands. Hands that are prone to crack from dryness in the winter. His calloused fingertips hardened from years of guitar playing and fixing factory machines. Those hands have also known the hard, unforgiving toll of migrant work. When I was younger, he would tell me stories of biking miles to pick pecans. As a newly arrived refugee from Vietnam, the only work he could find in America was the work no one else wanted. It wasn't until the Edward R. Murrow documentary, Harvest of Shame, that made the reality of my dad's hard work blatantly clear.
These are the forgotten people, the underprotected, the undereducated, the underclothed, the underfed. Because were it not for the labor of the people you are going to meet, you might not starve, but your table would not be laden with the luxuries that we have all come to regard as essentials.
The film premiered in 1960 to show the country the plight of migrant workers. 65 years later, I don't think much has changed. Looking at these trees now, I can only imagine the hardships my father faced, a David among Goliaths. Before there were mechanical tree shakers and machines to pick up the nuts, all of this was done manually. His constant pain was a legacy of this back-breaking labor. To understand my father, I had to retrace those early steps, to walk in the groves, and to learn that language doesn't always involve speaking. I had to forgive myself for not taking enough photos, for not recording more conversations until it was too late. I can't help but regret all those years of silence, missed conversations. For my father, perhaps it was enough that we were simply together, with an invisible network of roots connecting our family as one. And so, I learned from the pecan trees.
Well, that's our show. Thanks for listening. Learn more about the guests and topics we touched on this week by checking out our show notes. This episode of Meat and Three was reported by Maya Okindo, Bean Metcalf, Kia Damone, and Hugh Huen. Our lead producer on this episode was Maya Okindo, with support from Kiki Canuto, Ash Tyler, Jesse Nicely, and Taylor Graham. Our executive producers are Taylor Early and me, H. Conley. Our audio engineer is Sam Girardi. Our theme song was composed by Breakmaster Cylinder. This program is supported in part by the Julia Child Foundation for Gastronomy and the Culinary Arts, as well as public funds from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs in partnership with the City Council. Meat and Three is powered by Simplecast. Meat and Three is a production of Heritage Radio Network, the world's pioneer food radio station. Learn more at heritageradionetwork.org and follow us at heritage_radio and at meaty.gram. And if you haven't already, please sign up for our new and improved HRN newsletter. You can find the link in our show notes. And please stay in touch. Whether you have a story idea or just like to say hey, write us at ideas@meatand3.nyc. That's all spelled out.